Hello, everyone, and welcome to Out of Nowhere. Well, last time my guest was on the show was, believe it or not, was something like June 2024. So the time has gone so quickly. What have we been doing since? Well, my guest today is Nick Kyle. Nick is a retired deputy headmaster, now working part-time as a teaching specialist in the university sector. Nick has been psychically aware since early childhood, trying to understand his impression. He began to explore religion, shamanism, and spiritualism as a young man. Impressed by the late Professor Archie Roy, Nick expanded his interest to include psychical research, and for over 10 years, he was president of the Scottish Society for Psychical Research. He has investigated ostensibility cases of paranormality for almost 4 decades, counseling people who are upset by their anomalous experiences, confidentiality, free of charge and without publicity. Can we please welcome Nick to the show? Hello there.
Hello, Bob. Nice to see you again. You're looking well.
Thank you. I feel a lot better. Thank you very much.
Good.
After my hip operation.
Yeah, and I had an operation too just 6 weeks ago. I had a triple bypass.
You're doing better than what I am. How did it all start for you then? Getting involved with paranormal and all this?
I was the son of a clergyman, and at one point I lived in the village of South Ballachulish, near Glencoe in the west coast of Scotland. My father had 2 churches up there, so I grew up with an awareness of spirituality, but I wasn't aware of anything unusual or strange, except earth energies. I felt that some of the stones and some of the paths in that area, when I would walk alone with no one else there, contained an energy, and sometimes I like to just sit and feel the energy. And I thought everybody could feel this. And it was some years before I realized that hardly anybody spoke about earth energies. And then, of course, I went to school and learned and discussed a lot of things, did a lot of reading about UFOs and earth mysteries. But it was really university that got me studying and researching and reading and then joining the Scottish SPR. But it all started with an awareness of things that were best understood by you and I as earth energies. And I was about 9 years old when that happened. It stayed with me, incidentally. I now occasionally I'll do psychometry, but I think the label for what I do is clairsentience, where you can pick up energy from people and the environment that might help subsequent messages or impressions.
When you talk about the paranormal, anything can surprise you, can't it?
Oh, it's a vast area, isn't it? It contains hundreds of different types of things that we don't understand. The ones that people focus on are often ghosts, hauntings, poltergeists maybe, psychics and mediums. And I'm interested in all of these. But I'm interested in looking for the evidence because I'm fed up listening to the thousands of stories that have very little evidence to go with them. If we end up talking about paranormal experiences, I won't talk about the ones where I was the only person present, except for the one I've just given you as a child. All of my experiences are only worth talking about if there's at least one independent, reliable witness, and usually there's a dozen or more.
Yeah, I think I've spoke to Paul about this in the past. When we've seen something, he says, I'm glad you're here, Bob, because it's 2 of us now seen it, not just one. If one sees it, you think, oh, you know, people don't believe you.
Well, I do go out on investigations with my good wife, Sarah. and she is clairvoyant. She can see spirit, and whereas I just normally sense them or hear them. And I do talk about experiences that the two of us have had, but anybody who knows her, even superficially, will realise she's an independent woman from Northern Ireland. She has her own opinions, and she doesn't mind telling the world if I'm talking nonsense. Or at least she's never had to do it, but she often threatens to do it.
Tell you what I'd like to talk about as well a bit. How to use altered state for healing people.
Yeah. Funnily enough, I was talking to someone, a stranger, today about healing and the value of meditation. I can tell you two things. First of all, I learned meditation many years ago, 30 more years ago, and I found that as in my attempts to develop mediumship or psychic ability, or even just an awareness, an expanded conscious awareness of this thing we call reality in life, I found meditation was the best way. It's certainly the best way that I know of. And I've been able to teach others to develop their conscious awareness and sometimes their ability. And I can give you an example. I used to run a meditation group prior to the COVID pandemic, and attending it was a young man who had no real experience in meditation, but had been traumatized in the past. So he was looking for ways to unwind it deeply. And for one night only, I said, tonight we're going to send healing to someone. And I showed the picture of a lady who was in a nightgown sitting up in a bed. Maybe you could guess it was a hospital bed. But I just said, this lady's poorly and she could do with us all sending her healing. And I gave them a visualization of chakra-colored energies and so on. And that's what we did. And at the end of the session, when people normally talk about their meditation experience, he said, oh my God, I've had my first psychic experience. I was there with the woman. No, I hadn't given him any information. I hadn't told him it was my aunt. I hadn't told him she was in hospital. I didn't give her name or her address. And he said, I visited her and I was with her, but she wasn't alone. There was a young man in his 20s with short fair hair standing leaning over her and whispering to her, and she seemed happy. And the thing that I remember most clearly is he had a full-length metal brace on his left leg from the hip to the ankle. Now, what that young man didn't know, and I'm sure that no one would have told him, is that the lady was my aunt, and she had a son who died tragically in his 20s, and he had short fair hair, and he had a full-length metal brace on his left leg.
Oh.
Now, if you try and work out the chances, I would suggest that it's many thousands of one against the fact that that was done by chance. It's just, and it was a first for him, and he then began to believe in the power of what you and I would recognize as either clairvoyance or remote viewing, where you can extend your consciousness to a person or a place and sometimes get back information which is significant. The healing thing is another story maybe, because while I often send healing in and around a meditation group to each other, and it works online, I think, I was asked by a spirit person to go to Sao Paulo. And when I realized that it was a city in Brazil, because I didn't know, I had to Google it. I didn't go initially because my job as a deputy head would have made it very difficult to go, and I didn't. And exactly a year later, I think to the very same day, I woke up at 3:30, 4 o'clock again, as I did the first time, to have the same male voice say to me, "I thought you were going to Sao Paulo." And I said, well, I tried to, but they wouldn't let me go. I couldn't leave my job. And he said, so are you going or not? And I said, I'll go back in, and this time, if they won't let me go, I'll resign. I said, but can you tell me why you want me to go to Sao Paulo? Because I know nothing about the place. And he said, there are things there that we can teach you more easily than we can in Scotland. So I went in, I was refused early retirement. I handed in my letter of resignation. I took a drop in my pension. I got on a plane with a physics professor friend of mine, and we landed in Peru initially. I can talk about ayahuasca experiences there, but we went to Rio de Janeiro for a holiday, and then we went on to Sao Paulo for the last week and a half or so. And when we arrived at midnight, we were both exhausted, and we went straight to bed. So the next morning, my friend, who was an Uber organizer, a super organizer, he said, okay, Nick, so what are we doing now that we're here? And I said, I don't know. He said, no. He said, I've got all the maps and the train fares and taxi. You know. He said, have you got an address? So I'll look it up. I said, no. He said, what about a name? A person, an organization? I said, no. He said, do you even have a bloody telephone number? Have you been in touch with anyone? I said, only my spirit guide. And he said, I've come halfway around the world with a nutcase. And he said, so literally, what are we going to do to justify this trip? I said, we'll go walk. He said, you're in a city 3 times the size of London. Where are we going to walk to? I said, I don't know. But we started to walk, meandering in a sort of straight line. And the first building I stopped outside of was a typical, ordinary-looking office block. And it was 12 stories high. And what caught my eye was the word esprit on the wall. And I figured esprit might be Portuguese or Spanish for spirit. It probably was trainers or sportswear, or it was a travel company or something. And I walked through the door, and I immediately knew there was something of significance there. Because on the right-hand side, there was a bronze bust of Allan Kardec, the founder of Brazilian Spiritism. And I recognized it. And the lady who was sitting beside a big desk said, can I help you? She said it in her language. And I said, my name's Nick. I'm from Scotland. I think I'm meant to be here, but I honestly don't know why. And she snapped her fingers, and the man walked over, a very tall, distinguished-looking man, and she told him what I had just said. And they both burst out laughing. And they said, come on in, Nick. Spirit told us a fortnight ago you had set out on your journey, and we've been expecting you ever since.
Oh, God.
He said, because Spirit have told you to come here, you might not know this. He said, but you've walked into the largest spiritual healing hospital in the planet. Certainly the largest we've ever heard of. And he said, we have 11 floors of a hospital that uses mainstream medicine and spiritual healing.
Right.
You can go to any consultation, any treatment, any lecture or seminar, because we think if Spirit have told us to accommodate you, that's what we're going to do. And they even gave me a translator for the time I was there. And what I learned was about hands-off healing, where you put the hands near the person.
Yeah.
The patient sits in a chair, and there's a healer to the left and to the right and behind, and they're all holding the hands up or around the torso, the head of the person, and they're whispering to each other. Now, I couldn't tell just watching whether they were whispering to the patient, to each of the other healers, or to Spirit. But I watched intently, and the gentleman who was sitting beside me said, Nick, tell me what you see. I said, I see 3 healers trying to heal a patient. He said, well, what do you feel? I said, I feel that the woman on the right shouldn't be doing it because her own health isn't good. And I think she lacks confidence, and she knows that she's not performing at her best. And he burst out laughing. He says she's a clerical admin worker. We put her in as a test. She's never done it before.
Yeah.
He said, would you like to take her place? So I did. And what a surge of energy. It was like someone had plugged me into the mains. I was buzzing. And it wasn't so much because I was excited. I had done healing before, but this was very powerful and I never forgot it. And in the 12 years or so since, about 12 years, I've been doing it ever since. And I think if you add the power of meditation to the power of intention, you stand the chance of making things better. But can I just give a little cautionary word for those in your audience who think it's as simple as meditating and sending a visualization? 2 women came to me and said, can you help our father? He's in the hospice and he's dying. He's only got a short time to live. And we heard that you're a healer. And I said, yes, I'll come and see him, free of charge. And I said, I'll see him tomorrow. And I said, but just be aware that whereas you might be hoping for a miracle cure, if I visit, you might die even quicker. And they were shocked. You could see they were visibly surprised, taken aback. They're bringing in a healer and the father might die quicker. How does that work? And I said, well, it's like this. I will be giving him energy. And if he wants to go, it will make the transition smoother and easier. And that's exactly what happened. He passed very quickly with a smile on his face, just a few days, about 3 or 4 days after I visited. And I knew when I was visiting him. He had cancer of the throat. He couldn't really speak very well. He apologized for not being able to speak. And I could tell that he wanted to go. In fact, I would say that having done healing over the years, not everyone that asks for healing is ready to receive it. The gentleman I was speaking to today, a total stranger who said, I've got stage 4 cancer, I told him that there were things he should think of. He says, but I don't really believe in anything, not even religion. And I said, well, start, because time's not on your side. So not everybody that needs healing wants it or thinks it will work. And I did tell him about something that no doubt your audience will have heard of. Most people know about the placebo effect, where if you believe that you're going to be healed, even if you don't get the medicine, sometimes the belief is enough to heal you. And you don't achieve maybe the same as mainstream drugs do, but you make a significant improvement to just below the level if you took the drugs. But not everybody knows about the nocebo effect, which is the negative version of that. I could give you a bacterial infection and the tablets that will definitely get rid of it, because the tablets are targeted to that precise bacterium and it always clears within 3 days. But if I tell you you're getting the sugary control group Smarties, because you don't think you're getting the medicine, even though you are getting the medicine, it won't work. There's no known mechanism by which a negative thought or a negative feeling or a doubt or a mood can affect a biochemical reaction in your body, but it does. So what I said to the man today, and what I would say to your listeners, is stay positive, because you could literally be harming the person if you allow yourself to be negative.
Yeah, I've heard of that before, Nick, as well. You know, many people say, I say, have you been? I said, you're not looking too good. I've been to doctors. They give me this medication, but it's going to do me no good. I said, don't be like that. You've got to give them a chance. And I said, they will help you.
A medium friend of mine who is a healer, a genuine healer, once said to me, I like to get people before they go to a hospital. And I said, why? Won't hospital help them? He said, well, the drugs and the operations might help them, the nursing care and for the doctor's attempts to help, yeah, these things might help. He said, but they'll be outweighed if somebody says, "Oh, don't fancy your chances, mate. You've only got 6 weeks to go." He said, every patient that has believed that they're time limited has had their time limited. He said, I would rather have them in an environment where they only get positivity, optimism, hope, encouragement, and of course, energy, strategies that they can use. You'll have heard of Reiki and so on.
Yeah.
I don't practice Reiki, but I see it as just another fairly new version of the healing that's always taking place. You ask a mother to reflect on when their child is up. First thing they do is they grab it and cuddle it and caress the child and comfort the child. And it's because it's natural. We know that these things are natural. But I think sometimes we have too many pills in the world.
But when you're saying about that, just before I get to this question, when you're poorly, a cat or a dog will go near. A cat will cuddle up to you because you know you're not so well.
Dogs too, yeah.
Yeah.
And people sometimes. People.
There's a question from Paranormal Visitor. Hey, that's Lee, I know it is. Great to see you, Nick, as a guest again. Has Nick ever seen a person change its face details? If so, how many encounters, reports he has took?
Okay. Yes, I've seen faces change, but I can go further than that. I have seen partial materialization of faces and hands and legs, and I have touched spirit in these materialized states. And yes, I've seen faces change. I'll give you a couple of well documented examples. How would you put it? Attested reports. I was in a conference in Lytham St Anne's just a few years ago, and there was a speaker speaking about how he won won the world record for smashing concrete blocks using karate. And I think he smashed 10 or 11 blocks, and he got into the Guinness Book of World Records. And this was now 10, 11 years later when you think somebody else had broken his record. But he was standing talking about the power of the mind. Yeah? And I saw his face change. I saw him grow a darker coloured tone of skin and a beard, and to look down more with his eyes as if he was very serious. And I turned to the person next to me and I said, "Tell me what you see." And he said, "His face has gone dark and it looks like he's got a beard." And I said, "Study that face, because it might be the light from above, below, or to the side." And we both sat there looking at the same phenomenon until he was finished, maybe 10 minutes later. And we both went up to him with another 9 people. And all of us wanted to say, "We saw your face change." And his reaction was, "Oh yeah, that'll be my sensei, my teacher." He said he quite often takes me over when I'm speaking about karate or feats of the mind. And I thought that was a situation where, yes, it was a sort of paranormal conference, but that wasn't meant to be a demonstration of a change of face. I've known a spiritualist minister to bring through a Chinese guy, but it was under red light where the angle of the light did make the face look a little bit different. And I personally, this is just a personal prejudice I've got, I prefer to see things in good light.
Yes.
So that could have been genuine, and it certainly looked as if his face became Chinese. And it's happened to me when I go into trance states. People say that sometimes my face can change, and sometimes it's not even in a seance situation. It's in under electric light or daylight. And of course, I can't comment on that very much. But I would like to tell the questioners a story because I think it meets the criterion of evidence. I was very fortunate to be friendly with the late Glasgow healer and medium Albert Best. He was Spiritualist of the Year years ago, and he did tours in Africa and Australia and so on. And he was visited by royalty, or by stars of stage and screen, and royalty, and he was a very modest person. He was once called to a hospital because an infant was dying. And when he arrived in the room in the hospital, private room, there was the family gathered round the cot. There was the little infant child, and Albert scooped the child up in his arms. And his guide, his Arab guide, said to him, "You're too late, Albert. The call has already gone out for this one, the best." And Albert looked. The family didn't hear this. This was his telepathic message from his guide.
Yeah.
The family looked in expectation, expecting maybe a miracle healing, and Albert was overwhelmed by their emotions, and he felt he could only disappoint them. So he didn't want to do that. So he put the child back in the cot and walked slowly out of the room. And he stepped outside the ward to have a cigarette, because you could do that in those days in that hospital. And I'm not sure whether it was 10 minutes that passed or 15 minutes, but a short time after he went out to a cigarette, I don't think he even had time to finish his cigarette, he heard people shouting, "Where's Mr. Best? Where's Mr. Best? Is he around? Did he go away? What?" And he ran back in to the same room with the same family and the baby, and he picked the child up again in his arms, and it took one breath and died. And when he returned the child to the cot, he turned to the family and said, "How did you know exactly when to call me?" And they said, "We didn't." The baby's face changed to that of a brown, wizened, wrinkled-faced old man, and the baby spoke in a gruff man's voice, saying, "Tell Mr. Best to come, and quickly."
Oh.
So that's what we did. Now, several years after that, when Albert was poorly, funnily enough, in the same hospital, I went to see him, and another young man had gone to see him, and we didn't know each other, but we knew Albert.
Yeah.
And as the bell had gone for the end of the visiting time, Albert said to me, "You should speak to this chap here." I can't remember his name. He said, "Before you go." And I said, "I'm happy to speak to him. He seemed a nice person. But is there a reason, Albert?" He said, "Yeah, I know how skeptical you are." He said, "and he'll be able to confirm a story that I've told you." So outside the hospital, before we parted, I said to the young man, "What's the story that Albert says you can confirm?" And the young man said, "Did he ever tell you about a baby?" And I repeated the story I've just told you, Bob. And the young man, who was in his 20s, said, "Well, I can confirm that every word of that story is true, because I was there. That was my young brother that died in front of me."
Oh.
Now, isn't that remarkable?
Yes, it is remarkable.
Face changing can happen in babies, not just in spiritualists or mediums or gifted psychics. Transfiguration can happen in all sorts of situations.
How amazing is that?
Yeah. Just, I know it's not relevant to this question, but Albert also once said to me, "Would you like to see me heal, Nick?" Now, I'm saying this story to you very quickly. Albert would never say he was the healer. He would talk about spirit sending energy through him as a channel.
Yeah.
And he sometimes used to make fun of himself for not being a very good channel, but it seemed to work for him. He once challenged spirit, and he said, "Why me? I'm an uneducated Irish postman. I don't have a lot going for me." And he said, spirit said to him, "Well, it's like this, Albert. You've got two cars in your driveway. One's a Rolls Royce, but it doesn't have an engine. One's a beat up old banger of a Ford Anglia, but it does have an engine and it will go. You need to make the journey you choose. And he said, oh, so I'm the beat up old Anglia. And they said, but you work. You do the work. So we'd rather use you.
Oh.
And I went to his house. I can't tell you the number of film stars from Hollywood and the UK television and so on that went to his little tenement flat in Glasgow because he asked me to keep it confidential. Let me just say that people would be shocked because these are worldwide names. And I used to say to him, so what did they have to say? And he would never tell me. And I was one of his close friends. He said, the pain that brought these people to me are the only thing I'm interested in, not their fame, nor their money. He said, and I'm not going to keep it. I'm going to keep it confidential and not try and make money out of it.
Very
Story, to get back to the story, I turned up. There were roughly half a dozen people there, maybe 5. And a woman pushed a young man, late teens, into the room in a wheelchair. Now, he had some hydrocephalus, swelling of the skull, but that wasn't why he had been brought, I don't think. His mother said he's been diagnosed with having an inoperable brain tumour, and his condition is terminal because it's inoperable. He's been given a few months to live. And Albert closed his eyes, sat down, and began to speak in German. Stood up with his eyes closed, reached out and stroked the teenager with a light stroke of his fingers over the forehead like this. And a dark globular mass came away in his fingers, was put into a basin of water, taken away by his friend who was assisting him, and he sat back down. And I had been watching programs on psychic surgeons who were using sleight of hand to use pig entrails to, So I was well aware of that stuff, and I have an interest in conjuring, an amateur interest. So I was well aware, but he was like me. He didn't have any shirt sleeves to hide anything up. And he reached forward with his hands with his eyes shut, and he was a single stroke. So I kept in touch with the mother. And about 2.5, 3 weeks later, when I hadn't heard anything, I phoned her up. And I said, what's the story? And she said, oh, we got an apology. An apology? From whom? She said, my son's oncologist. He said, we must have mixed up your son's record with some other patient because he not only does he not have a brain tumour, there's no sign that he ever had one.
Oh,
so who do you believe?
Exactly. Yeah, oh, do.
The eyewitness report of an uneducated Irishman standing, speaking in German, we had the German guide at that point, or that an oncologist would admit to an error that could lead to somebody losing their job. I know from many, many experiences of Albert that he should be believed. But of course, getting your audience who have never met him to believe that, I think is understandably a bit more difficult. The question says, how many encounters or reports have I taken? I've been investigating cases for about 35 years, and I don't normally turn people down. So I've been to all kinds of hauntings and nasty experiences, some of whom it would be difficult to even tell the story because people would struggle to believe it. But I always work in teams and pairs. And those are the only experiences that I'm happy to talk about, Bob. But let me just say that there is a world that we have been trained and conditioned not to believe that it exists. and it's very real for some people. And the paranormal world, the psychic world, the world of entities, does sometimes intrude and needs to be removed. And people can tell I don't have a book, I don't have a DVD, I don't have any intention to promote myself anywhere. I only made a promise to Spirit. If they give me the evidence, I'll talk to anyone who shows an interest in the evidence. And other than that, I don't even charge. Sometimes I go and talk in parts of the world and I pay my own expenses.
It's a true gentleman you are.
Yeah, I don't want people to think that's something special about me, but it shows I don't have a financial motivation that some people do.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I totally agree with you there. A question from Lee again. So why does Nick think some people can change how they're special from birth or alien, etc.?
That's a good question. I don't think I've been asked that before. The first thing I would say is when I was a child, age 9, I used to sit by a stream, and at that age I used to do angling, fishing. But later, when I didn't fish, I still liked to sit in the same stones beside the same stream. And I learned that although I would recognize the stones beside the stream, and the stream didn't seem to change very much, little in strength and colour after rain maybe, but that's about it. But I recognise as a child that stream may look similar, but actually there's not a single particle or molecule of water in front of me just now that was there the last time I visited. The stream is constantly changing. Now, I don't know about you, Bob, but I'm getting to be a little old now. I'm almost 70. And I am aware that in my life, I've not just been constantly changing. Sometimes the change just results in a blur. And you think, where the hell did the decades go? Never mind the years or the months.
Yes.
So I would say, in answer to that question, everyone is capable of change. But if you mean paranormal abilities, or the ability to change features and faces and maybe psychic abilities, here's what I think is the truth, and it's quite easy to prove it, I think. Some people seem to have a natural talent from birth. Albert Best would be one of them. Some people just naturally, from a young age, show the kinds of abilities that in later years they're recognized for it. Some people acquire their skills after trauma, after maybe an injury or a major upset. And I'll give you an example. One of my friends is Dominic Bogue, an up-and-coming young medium from this part of the west of Scotland, currently touring America because he's so successful. And he was hoping to become a police officer, but he lost his sight. He became blind, and he couldn't. So he ended up working in a call centre. And then he realised that spirit were speaking to him just as clearly as the people on the phone. So he began to work more and more for spirit, and they were asking him to work. And a member of his family who predeceased him was his gatekeeper, if you like, and helped him. Now, he has been impressing people with his clear audience. He doesn't see images in the way that we do. But he hears, and he listens, and he repeats what he's told. Whispers, and then he repeats it in a louder voice for the audience. And I can tell you, I've tested him, and he did very well. Can I give you a short description of one of the tests?
Oh, yeah, of course you can, yeah.
Okay, so I received a letter from a woman enclosing a photograph, and she said, Nick, I hear that you're a medium and what's on. Can you give me advice? I've lost my son. Okay. And I immediately wrote back to her and said, I might be able to help you, but I'm not very experienced or confident in this kind of mediumship, missing persons or, trying to give psychic advice to a stranger. I said, but I know someone that can do it, and it's Dominic Bold. So she gave me permission, and I put the letter into an envelope and sealed it, the photograph into an envelope, and then I asked for an interview with Dominic. At that time, I was helping him to draft his book. And I said to him, let's do a test, and we'll put it into the book, no matter whether it's successful or not. And he agreed. So I said, in this envelope, we have a letter, not telling you anything about the letter. In this envelope, we have a photograph. It may or may not be related to the letter. You should be able to tell me because you're the medium. And he laughed. And remember, he's registered blind.
Yeah.
And this is what he said. The letter writer is a woman, a mother, and she's very worried about her son, who's now an adult, and he's the center of a group photograph in the other envelope. And she's worried about him because, she's lost him. I took that to mean he's died. But as Dominic went on, he went on to explain, no, he just left the house and never come back. She's never heard from him since, and she knows he's got a sort of drugs issue, and she doesn't know whether he's alive or dead. That was the reality, and Dominic told me that, and I didn't know that. So he finished having made 75 statements that were written down at the time, not by me, but by a research assistant, my wife, actually. And of the 75 statements, 59 were accepted as correct. Now remember, he had no chance to know what was in the envelopes. He had never met the woman. She wasn't local. She came from England. I was the only person that communicated with her. And when we then fed back to that lady, she came up to Scotland. We met in a restaurant, her and her boyfriend, and my wife and I, and we went over the statements, and she was the one that said, that's correct and that's wrong. I'm not sure about that. And so 59 were accepted as correct. The others might have been correct too, but she wasn't sure and it maybe needed some explanation. Yeah. So we didn't mess about with that. 59 correct out of 75. I would politely suggest to your listeners, they should try that experiment. They should put some kind of text or letter into one envelope. It could be a British gas bill, it doesn't matter. And they put some kind of photograph or picture in the other envelope. Seal them, say nothing to no one, and give it to somebody who thinks they're psychic. I would suggest that not only will they make very general statements that are almost worthless, unlike Dominic, who was very specific about things, but I think they'd be lucky to get half a dozen statements correct out of 75.
Yeah. And
I have tried this, and it's really difficult. And if you blindfold them just to give the sense of what it's like to be dominant, they think it's impossible. 75% success rate, because 59 out of 75 is 3/4. 75% success rate is bloody good.
That is good.
Michael Jordan, world famous basketball player and the best in the history of the sport, he only got about 80% of his baskets. And yet he's lauded all over the world as being the best basketball player ever. I don't think we should expect 100% from our mediums. But if you get a medium to be right 75% of the time with specific details, you're in a winner there.
Rebecca's she just a question for you. Can you share any stories of distant healing? Thank you.
First of all, I believe that it works. And a story earlier suggests that there was something unusual about a healing that was done as part of a meditation practice. I can't give stories that I can personally say I was there and I had a witness, and that's why I know that it worked. I can only feed you back what patients or clients have said. This is absolutely fantastic and wonderful. What the hell have you done? Did you touch me at all? Because I felt as if I was being touched, but I hadn't, and I had a witness to say that. So when you get feedback like that, when you're with someone, that's very encouraging. But when you get it when you've not visited the person, that's strange. That is paranormal. If I had to explain it, I would say if someone knows you're going to send them healing and they relax and they're open and receptive to it and so on, it is quite likely that they'll express their appreciation because they're getting your attention.
That's, I'm going to say, Nick, that is the thing. You've got to be open to it as well.
Yes, and I can give you examples of people who asked for healing who weren't ready to be healed. But where someone accepts healing at a distance, even when they say, "Oh, that was wonderful," and so on, I think, yeah, that maybe that's my favourite word, by the way. Maybe that's right, and healing is taking place. Time will tell. Some young mediums and healers come to me for advice, not very often, but when they do, they usually are worried that people will think they're making it up or it's their imagination. And I say, don't hold back. Give the healing, give the message, do the psychic or mediumistic work, because time will tell you if you're wasting your time. Time will tell you if you're right or wrong. And your job is to reflect. If you're right, what did you do that made it right? And if you're wrong, what did you do that misled you? And if you do that, you'll not be sitting filleting messages out of an anxiety that you'll be made to look foolish. And I tell people, I've done really well in my career, being a deputy head for 22 years. And I say to people, I made lots of mistakes. Lots of mistakes, some big, some small, but it doesn't affect your worth to be busy, because busy people make mistakes. People who are lazy and do nothing and achieve nothing, yeah, they're not going to make so many mistakes, but who wants to go like that?
Exactly. I'd like to, before we go, we've plenty of time left here, about the skull experiment. How did you get involved with that?
I've always had an interest in physical mediumship. To me, it's the gold standard of mediumship. Mental mediumship is impressive, but physical mediumship is the best for me. And of course, the school experiments were all about light phenomena and physical effects, physical phenomena. I asked Albert Best, did he know of any reputable physical mediumistic seances that I could attend? And he said he knew of only a few that were reliable in getting phenomena, and no, I couldn't attend them because they were closed groups and they don't want publicity and they don't want strangers sitting there saying, how is this being hoaxed or faked and so on. He said, however, there is one group in Norfolk, he said, that I hear such good reports about. Yeah. I'll write you a letter of introduction, and just maybe, if they know me, they'll let you in for one sitting. And then Albert died before he could write the letter. And just a few weeks, maybe a few months after Albert's death, one of my home circles said that they had been approached by a group in Norfolk. Would 5 people like to come down from Scotland to observe their seances? They call them experiments. This group, the Skull group, had been meeting in the village of Skull near Disson, Norfolk, for several years, but 3 years where they claim never to have had an unsuccessful seance. They always had light phenomena, they always had clairvoyance and accurate messages, and they frequently had physical phenomena, physical effects on the sitters or the immediate environment. So I was excited, but I had been to several seances and was disappointed. It's very easy to fake it in the dark, you know. You just need 1 or 2 plants within the large group of 20 odd. And if they know what they're doing and things have been measured out in the room beforehand, they can move around quite easily. And you think things are flying over there and the medium somewhere in front of you. No, it's the plant that is doing it. You know, the person that they're faking it until they can make it. Now, of course, I'm not going to mention names on your show. I don't want either of us to be sued, but there are several mediums who have let themselves down. And that is a disservice to the genuine ones. Scroll invited 30 odd scientists, researchers, and investigators to their seances, including a number from NASA when they held the same seance in America and in Spain. And NASA have never agreed that they sent a group formally, and none of the group were able to say what they experienced. But Robin Foy said to me they got the same phenomena that they got in Norfolk. Lights whizzing around, touching people, so it wasn't some visual phenomena, and things moving, levitating, and so on. But your questioner would maybe be interested in my corroborated experience or that of my wife. The first time we went, in a darkened room that I checked out beforehand, concrete floor, brick built, arch cellar, 14 chairs, 4 for the mediums, 10 for the visitors, 5 from Scotland, 5 from England, playing a little bit of music and a small trolley, and no room to walk round the group. Once you were seated, there wasn't enough space to walk behind, for example. Mm. And the lights went out. And the first, I'm embarrassed telling you this, Bob, but this is the simple truth. I don't believe in telling lies. I saw stars above me. Now, it was a basement cellar. There was no windows, right? And the stars were swirling like a solar system. And I thought, now that's clever. They've used light fiber optic cables linked to a computer somewhere. We're in some sort of high-tech candid camera, if you remember that program.
Oh, yeah, I do, yeah.
And the light fiber optics are switched on and off and apparently swirling, but it's just a fake. And it was the most impressive fake I'd ever seen until they came down into the room and began to touch people. And you go, you know, I mean, and the stars were getting bigger and they became the size of small peas, and then they became the size of maybe a cherry or something, and they would shine in all directions. Some people get photographs of orbs, and the question really is, how can you get three-dimensionality? You need 2 different vantage points. Well, in that room, we had 10 vantage points around the room, and we were all agreeing on what we were seeing. And these were self-illuminating, 3-dimensional lights. Now, we also got accurate clairvoyance, objects on the coffee table levitating, bells ringing that were hanging, no one was touching them. When I asked Robin Foy, will there be a red light or a blue light or any kind of light, he laughed. And he said, no, Nick. He said, we put the electric lights off and we take the light bulbs out. And that was actually my job, to make sure nobody tried to put a light on. He said, spirit will light up the room for you. And I laughed. But that was true. I could see everyone. I could see the furniture. I could see the dimensions of the room as intermittent flashes of light when 10, 20 of these things are swirling around, sometimes right into your face and moving around. And people were getting touched, and I wasn't. And I said with a pitted lip, nobody's, nothing's touched me. And Robin Foy said, put your hand out. And I went like that and put my hand out. And a light shot round the room just beside the palm of my hand and went like that. And I turned my hand and it kept the contact, it went from horizontal to vertical. And I said to Robin, is it okay if I cover it with my other hand? And he laughed. He said, on you go. And this little thing that felt like a rubber ball, it had mass, was jumping about inside my hand, and I'm going like this because as a fisherman, I wanted to find out, is there a line attached to this LED or anything like that?
Yes.
And there wasn't. And then the light was coming out from between my fingers, and when I opened my hands, it came up, shone the light in my face and zoomed off again. Now, that's impossible.
How, at that time, what were you thinking?
I'll tell you what I was thinking. So the stories I've heard about this phenomena happening can happen. These things that I had been told about and dreamt about or I read about and wondered, could this possibly be true? It was happening in front of me. And we were told it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So when we came home and it was a buzz of chatter and I wrote a short report about it all, we were invited back 6 months later. And I said to Robin Foy, Robin, he said it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and we wouldn't get an invite back. He said, that's what I thought at the time. But the Spirit team have specifically requested you and your 4 companions from Scotland, my wife and a couple, and the guy in the couple was a hypnotherapist, which is important for people to think it was all group hypnosis or something, and another guy who was an experienced sitter. And when we went down, we were told, Spirit have asked for 10 people who are good energy contributors, because they're going to try and experiment the likes of which has never been done by this group. They're going to attempt to bring through entities from other dimensions of existence and not just deceased persons, which is what the school spirit team was. And we had to wait maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15, and then it happened. And this is, I'm going to sit back for this because I don't know how people are going to react. 5 spaceships materialized in the room, miniature sized, and flew around, lighting up everybody. If they were flying around the room, focusing your face, they would never lose their focus in their searchlight beams underneath. They would always be maintained in you while whirring around. One was wedge-shaped with a curved edge. One was like a Chinook helicopter, but there were no whirring blades. Another was the classic flying saucer type, with lights going round and lights pointing down, picking up items on the coffee table. And the thing I like to tell people about is my wife levitated. Now, she would hit me if she was here. She's up in Aberdeen just now, because she would say, I'm cheeky. She's a substantial girl, Bob. And I couldn't lift her in a chair the way she was lifted that night. She couldn't move, and she was trying to swing the chair back onto the ground. It wasn't moving an inch, right? And more than that, one of the light orbs shot inside her ribcage and made her squeal, not in pain, but in shock, because it felt like a ribcage was being tickled from the inside by this little light orb bouncing around. And then suddenly it came out, floated in the room, and whizzed off. And that happened to other sitters. But I mentioned my wife's experience because, of course, I trust her with my life and I was there to see it. Also, 2 men materialized. One was really communicating with her, but the other was standing to his left. And he said, take my hand. And she took his hand like a normal handshake.
Yeah.
And he said, don't be afraid. This is just to reassure you that we're very real. And she said, can I feel up your arm? And he laughed. And she got as far as the elbow and there was no body attached. But she still had the hand. It was warm. It was a male hand. She squeezed it. She could feel the texture of the skin. And it was going up and down. And she was like that with
No body.
No body attached. Now, I struggled to believe what I was seeing because I was only seeing flashes of light round about a dark outline of a figure, and his back was turned to me while he was speaking to her. I could hear whispering, but I couldn't hear what was said. And then the same thing happened to me, but in another seance group years later. So I know that such things can happen. I'm looking here at Rebecca's question, and I feel we maybe haven't done it justice. Here's what I would say if you know someone who needs distant healing. Ask them, do they believe in it? And it's okay if they don't, but are they open to receiving energy? Are they willing to put the telly off and take away all sorts of distractions, including phones and interruptions and visitors? Are they willing to relax and visualize opening up trapdoors of energy in their body, similar to the chakras? And then can you get not one healer, but a group of people to collectively send energy to the parts of that person that need it most, and it's not always physical, sometimes it's mental and emotional, and then seek feedback. I can honestly say any healing I've been involved with has always been of value. Of value. It doesn't mean that the person's miraculously cured within days, although we have had near-death experiences that have the person bounced right back and lived for years. A lot depends on the person receiving the healing. My understanding is all healing is self-healing. The role of medicine and the role of healers is to try and get the person to flick the switch inside themselves to trigger that healing. And that I can give you an argument along those lines, but people who believe that if they have a teddy bear or if they have a special toy, the child will quieten down and be happier. Yeah, it's a stuffed toy, it can't do anything. What's happening is the child will be encouraged to flick the happy switch or the comfort switch or reduce the anxiety that allows them to then say, all right, I'll cuddle my teddy and I'm all right now. But the teddy doesn't do it. And then for adults, is it your boss, your holiday, your salary, your promotion prospects, your love and romance or whatever? These external factors do not make you happy. You decide to flick the happy switch or the relevant emotion, and you justify it by saying, well, I got a raise, therefore I can put a smile on my face. You could have put the smile on your face before then. You know what I mean? So yeah. I think healing is like that. I think an awful lot of people don't like the responsibility of healing themselves. And I'm speaking to somebody who's just come through heart surgery.
I know you have.
I was told it was a miraculous and strong recovery. I was in ICU for less than 48 hours, and I was walking about and ready to go home after 4 days. And I was released in the 5th day because they wouldn't let me go home in the 4th day. So it's not that you, because you're a healer, you'll get special dispensation to be a wonderful example.
Oh, no.
What it means is you know something that helps. And can I squeeze in something else that will help Rebecca if she's speaking or thinking about distant healing?
Yeah.
What did Nelson Mandela say in his inaugural speech as South Africa's president? He'd spent 27 years, I think it was, locked up in solitary confinement with lots of time to reflect. And he was an intellectual, so he did reflect. What did he say to the whole nation? Our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our greatest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. Now, he was quoting an American poet, Marianne Williamson, I think it was. But think about what he's saying. What's the problem with believing that in your mind or your psyche you have this enormous power? The problem is the responsibility that it brings with it. Now, I might be controversial here, Bob, you can tell me, but I think we're not taught that we are powerful beyond measure. We are taught sometimes that we don't even have the self-worth to hold down a job, that we're just a little cog in a big machine, and that really we should just do our job and shut up and help the system to tick over. And frankly, all of that's wrong. And I'm a teacher, 34 years experience, still teaching. And I think we're not teaching children or adults how powerful they can be in their mind, their intellect, their imagination, their aspirations, their conscious awareness. We don't even understand our own minds. People talk about the subconscious as if they understand it. And I speak to scientists and researchers about consciousness, which is the new buzzword. And I say to them, everything in reality has a structure. Everything. A plant, a piece of furniture, our bodies, it's all got a structure. What's the structure of consciousness? And almost everyone has struggled to answer that. Only one scientist gave me maybe a kind of fudge answer, which I still think about. Here's what I would say to people. If you live your life with an expanded conscious awareness, you won't be able to control what happens to you, and bad things do happen to good people, but you will be able to choose how to respond. If you don't live your life consciously aware, if you're an autopilot or half asleep, or you feel stupid, and I was told I was a slow learner when I was at school, you won't have thoughts because they will have you probably by the throat. If you don't have conscious awareness of people's feelings, don't be surprised if one day they overwhelm you. Your own feelings aren't something you're connected to. If you have a conscious awareness, you can't control reality, but you can decide how best to respond. And when I teach my university students, I say to them, do you want to know how to respond? No matter what you're given as a teacher problem, respond with love and kindness, with positivity. Be constructive, regardless of how challenging the problem is, and you will find success. A kid once was very badly behaved in school, but he would do what I told him, and I never figured out why. And I got moved away from the school and promoted, and I met him years later in a car park. And I got him laughing because I said to him, you know what I remember about you? You've still not handed in that homework.
Yeah.
And he laughed. And then I said, can you tell me something? You were badly behaved in school. You were challenging and so on. I said, why did you do what I asked you to do? Because I've never understood it. And he smiled. He said, oh, that's easy, Mr. Kyle. I remember how I felt when I was with you. Now that, Bob, contains the secret of relationships and connecting and getting the best out of situations.
Yeah.
People might forget what you teach them or the skills that you teach them, but they're less likely to forget how you made them feel when you were teaching them. How many relationships can you see get on round about you that don't have that loving quality?
Oh, loads. Absolutely loads about.
But maybe that's not paranormal enough for your audience. You know, that's a bit of constructive life advice, maybe. But I do think it has an impact. I'm privy to not so much secrets, but things that are not in the public domain. I run a private group for researchers and scientists that by invitation only, and it's quite big now. It started out as a small discussion group, and there's now 20 odd people in it. They come to the group because they want to talk openly without worrying about the tenure of their university positions or their scientific posts. And they do speak freely. And they say things like, first contact with aliens, yeah, we can talk about that. They've just drafted a paper for the United Nations that's been reviewed at the moment to say how humanity should respond, not on behalf of any one government or ethnicity or religion, but how to respond to first contact with alien visitors on behalf of all of humanity. Now, these kind of discussions and conversations you just don't get in the normal world of investigators who are jostling for position and whose egos are trying to outdo each other. And by the way, do you have any money? You know, and so it goes on. I'm just not interested in any of that.
No, I'm glad you're not as well.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, it's a shame about. I interviewed Robin on my show as well before he died. It wasn't long after, and Mick Ganley, a friend of mine, I don't know if you know Mick.
No.
He went over to see Robin before he died. And Joanne, she's from Holland, his wife, and they went over to stop with Robin for about 3 weeks. he said he wasn't very well. He said he was struggling, getting about. We had to run him here and there, did the shopping for him and everything. But he said, I just wanted to go see him, talk to him, got some advice off him and various other things. We came back. It wasn't long after he passed away.
I, I mean, I don't know who's listening to this and whether they knew Robin or not, but he was a remarkable man. He had devoted decades of his life to promoting physical mediumship, and he worked in the newspaper industry, the printing side of it, and he was a self-publicist, and he liked the limelight, and he could tell a good story, but he was earnest, he was authentic, he was sincere, and he did lots with no thought of money or reward. And he certainly gave me the most profound experiences for myself and for my wife. And we had been to seances for years. This was on another level. Incidentally, we've had similar phenomena since school in groups in Scotland, but I don't have the same freedom to talk about these things.
No.
I would just want your audience to know that groups that are successful won't want to publicize it necessarily, because it only brings hassle and sometimes danger and envy and character assassination and doubt and so on. They're usually behind closed doors, but they do exist, and I have attended some of them, maybe 7 or 8, and I've experienced similar phenomena to school, where furniture goes through the ceiling, and sometimes when it comes back, through the wall as well, and it doesn't always come back. But when it does come back, there's no marks in the ceiling and the wall. Or how about this? Everyone's sitting in a circle, and when the lights come on after the seance, they've all changed seats, but none of them were aware of moving.
Ah. I know Derek was saying that, Derek's story, Derek Savery before he died, you met him, I introduced him to you at the conference.
Yeah.
Poor old Derek died, unfortunately. But he was saying, when he went in one, he said the floor changed. There was a carpet when I went in, and then the carpet disappeared under my feet.
And I've had the great privilege of being able to talk to Spirit at length, the way I'm talking to you, maybe for 20, 25 minutes at a time on several occasions. And I've asked them some difficult questions. I would like to be able to say that I learned about the secrets of reality from what they said. But actually, the truth is, they basically bounced the questions back to the questioner, back to me, and said, our job is not to interfere with your lifetime experience. You're here for a human life experience, and we've not to hand you what you've to learn on a silver platter. We cannot live your life for you, so don't try and take shortcuts. And I thought at the time, my mum asked them questions about physics or quantum physics or whatever, and I felt very frustrated. But I'm now beginning to think, actually, Spirit once said to me, remember well, because you've forgotten where you came from and to where you will return. And if you can remember that, you'll not need to ask these questions.
Oh, nice.
So I've got a little easel in which I've written those words on the easel, and it sits on my mantelpiece.
Oh, it's brilliant.
It took Spirit a while to get that message through to me, and it was worth it, I think. So whenever I get difficult questions that I can't answer by saying, well, what's it like in this world with people? I was asked yesterday, are there such a thing as bad spirits? And I said, yeah. And they went, really? I said, well, are there such a thing as bad people? If you pull 100 people from the ones that are walking past us just now, what would your expectation be? How many of them will be good people? And the person said, most of them. And I said, yeah. But there'll probably be in a typical 100, half a dozen that are not so good. Spirit world's no different. I said, you don't suddenly become an angel because you've lost the body. I said, so in the spirit world, I only work with people that are high in their energy and their purpose, and they want to show compassion. I don't work with people, if I can choose, who want to harm and hurt. And when I'm called into houses where there is a negative, violent predator in spirit, I do get rid of them. And if people say to me, how do you get rid of a negative entity, Nick? I can hand on say, after maybe doing it maybe 200 times, I don't know. I walk in and the phenomena collapses. It stops, it goes away, it withers, it dies, it evaporates. And that's maybe because I'm clear that I'm going in with the whole spirit team and they're doing the work. It's not really to do about Nick, that's ego. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now I try not to get involved in haunted houses and so on, unless there's children that are genuine distress, because there are too many of them, Bob. There are too many places that we could tell what stories and so on.
Oh, God.
I could tell you some funny stories, but maybe you need to invite me back for another night for that.
I will do, because it's been a fascinating subject tonight. And I can tell by everybody's in the chat rooms enjoyed it. It's always nice to have some questions as well from people in the chat room. But thank you so much, Nick, for coming on the show. It's been wonderful, as always, when you're on.
Thank you.
But I'll definitely get you back on again, maybe with your wife next time as well.
Yeah, the only reason she's not here just now is because she was in Aberdeen, and she said if I changed the date, she would join me. And I said, well, what we'll do is we'll keep the date for tonight, but we'll get her to come the next time.
Yes, we'll make sure next time, but you're both free.
Yeah, she's an interesting person because she grew up in a farm that was haunted, and
right.
Some of the ghosts used to go around checking the animals. You would see the lights and the doors opening, the barns and so on, and the gates and being checked and so on. And of course, there was nobody there. So these would be memories that they were seeing of people. And she can see spirits. So sometimes she'll say to me, how many people are standing at the bus stop? And I'll say, 5. Oh, thank God, she says, because I thought one of them was a ghost. That's how solid they seem to her. And I don't see spirit normally. I sense them and I hear them and I work with them. But what a privilege it is to have an open, non-judgmental look at why we believe what we believe. Some of the best discussions I've had over maybe online or over dinner on paranormal subjects with skeptics as well as believers and people with gifts. So the work that you're doing is important, Bob. You're providing a space for respectful exchange of ideas.
Yeah, great. I love it. Anything. I love everything about spiritualism, paranormal, entities, aliens, werewolves. I love anything like that.
I'll tell you something that I'm not happy about, but I don't want to end on a negative note, so I'll keep it brief. I think the standard and the quality of mediumship, particularly online mediumship, is very disappointing.
I totally agree with you there.
Give you some examples. This is just in the last few weeks. I have a woman here who is a mother and a grandmother. Can anybody take her? I have a woman here who is a mother and a grandmother. Can anybody take her? That's not spiritual mediumship.
No, it's not.
It's fishing, what I call fishing. And there are body snatchers out there who go, my mum was a grandmother, so it must be for me. And, and I have heard it said, and your audience will laugh maybe, I have heard it said in a Scottish church I've got a Jimmy here. Does anybody know a Jimmy?
Oh my God. I know it's terrible. Sometimes I cringe when I've been to services and I think, oh my God, is this real?
But then you come across the one gifted person who does give a message and you think, oh my God. But they're very rare. In my experience, a handful of people maybe. But to listen to them, trying, they're full of ego. You can sometimes say there's no spiritual energy around them, but they want to exude confidence as if they know what they're talking about. I'm quite fond of telling a wee story in a positive way, maybe to finish. There was a little spiritualist lady who ran a small church in Glasgow years ago, and her name was Jean Primrose. And Jean had a reputation for bringing on mediums and novices and so on, but she was quite demanding. She set the bar high. She had ethics and standards. So one night she had a night for fledgling mediums, novice mediums. And a young man got up and he identified somebody and he was telling them what he was getting from spirit. And it was detailed and it was a story and there was a narrative and so on. And he was going on and on and on. And Jean Primrose got up on the stage beside him and she put her hand on his shoulder. And he thought, because I spoke to him later, he thought, I'm doing so well here. She's giving me some of her power to add to the message. He was quite exalted. And she leant over and whispered, sit down, son, because there's nobody with you.
I like that. I like that.
More honesty like that, Bob. Yeah.
I've been quite lucky when I've been doing radio shows. The mediums I've had on my show have all been good. Can't knock anybody.
Gordon Smith is a highly reputable medium over many years in Scotland. And I know that he visits Europe on a regular basis. And just recently, I think he was even doing that with Dominic Bogue, the person I was talking about.
Oh, yes.
And one of the things that I admire about Gordon is not how good quality his messages have always been. He lives in Helensburgh, a town in the west coast of Scotland, and he hired Helensburgh Town Hall one night. Now, I can't remember, I was there, but I can't remember how many people would have been there. Let's say 400, maybe 600. The town hall was full. Yeah. And he basically started the show a little late, stood up and said, I'm sorry, spirit aren't with me tonight. I don't have a connection, but you'll all get your money as you go out the door, because that's what I was spending a few minutes arranging. Now, that is an impressive medium.
That is, yes.
Because he could have stood there and done padding and used his psychic abilities and so on. No, he wanted to be honest, and it would have cost him to refund everyone's ticket.
Of course, it would have done.
But that's the standard, and it's a high standard, and I think everyone should follow it.
I do as well. Thank you for that. Finishing on that. That's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But thank you again.
Yeah, I'll see you.
And you take care. Have a lovely weekend.
You too, Bob, especially with your health. I'll send you some distant healing.
Thank you. That'd be great.
Good.
I'll take everything.